He had been ambushed in the shadows of Oakwood Forest. No backup, no radio signal, just crimson blood spreading across fallen leaves and 2 bullets lodged deep in his chest. Officer Devon Hayes had stumbled onto something deadly, and someone had made sure he wouldn't live to tell about it. But the forest wasn't empty. 2 11-year-old black twin sisters on their Saturday morning hike with their loyal German shepherds found what no child should ever witness. They weren't heroes, not yet. Just sisters with an old flip phone, fierce determination, and 2 dogs who would prove that sometimes the greatest courage comes on 4 legs. What they did next would expose a 15-year police corruption scandal and remind you why family, faith, and doing what's right still matters in this broken world. Subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell. The morning air cut sharp and clean through Oakwood Forest, carrying the scent of damp earth and pine needles. October had painted the Georgia woods in shades of amber and rust, and the trails were carpeted thick with leaves that crunched underfoot like scattered secrets. It was barely 8 a.m. on a Saturday when Kaya and Kendra Williams took their usual path through the less traveled sections of the forest, 2 dogs bounding ahead of them with boundless energy. Kaya walked with purpose, her dark eyes constantly scanning the trail ahead, thick, natural hair pulled back in a neat bun beneath a bright orange knit cap. At 11, she already carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who'd learned to watch out for others. Kendra moved beside her, gentler in nature, always stopping to examine an interesting leaf or photograph, a butterfly with the camera their grandfather had given her for her birthday. Despite being identical twins, their personalities diverged like river branches. Kaya the protector, Kendra the dreamer. Both girls wore matching navy blue hoodies with Williams Family Reunion 2023 and sturdy hiking boots that had seen countless adventures through these woods. At their sides moved 2 magnificent German shepherds. Caesar, the elder at 6 years old, was a powerful black and tan male with intelligent amber eyes and the bearing of a natural leader. His coat gleamed in the morning light, and he carried himself with the dignity that came from years of training and devotion. Beside him bounded Atlas, barely 18 months old, but already showing the size and strength he'd inherited from his father. Where Caesar was measured and wise, Atlas was all enthusiasm and courage, learning from his elder with eager devotion. The girls had permission to hike these trails. Their mother, Detective Lieutenant Shauna Williams, had taught them forest safety since they could walk. Both dogs wore bright reflective collars, and the girls carried emergency whistles, a first aid kit, and their grandmother's old but reliable flip phone that got signal even in the deepest parts of the woods. They'd taken the old timber trail, a path rarely used since the logging operations ceased 5 years ago. Dead leaves muffled their footsteps, and the only sounds were the distant call of crows and the occasional snap of branches under deer hooves far off in the underbrush. Caesar stopped suddenly, every muscle in his body going rigid. His ears shot forward, nose lifted high, testing the air with the intensity of a dog who'd caught something wrong. Atlas immediately pressed close to his father, hackles rising instinctively as he followed the older dog's lead. "What is it, Caesar?" Kaya whispered, her voice barely audible above the morning breeze. The big dog let out a low, urgent whine and bolted off the main trail, weaving between trees with Atlas close behind. The girls followed without hesitation, their hearts beginning to race as some primal instinct told them something terrible waited ahead. 40 yards into the thick undergrowth, partially concealed by fallen brush and scattered leaves, they found him. Officer Devon Hayes lay crumpled against the base of a massive oak tree, his body twisted at an unnatural angle. Blood had pooled beneath him, soaking deep into the earth like spilled ink on ancient parchment. His face was ghostly pale, lips tinged blue, and 2 gaping wounds in his chest rose and fell with each shallow, desperate breath. His police radio lay shattered beside him, and his service weapon was nowhere to be seen. Kendra gasped, her hands flying to cover her mouth. Kaya dropped to her knees beside the dying officer, her mother's emergency training flooding back as adrenaline sharpened her focus. "He's alive," she whispered, fingers trembling as she hovered near the wounds. "But he's losing too much blood." Caesar began circling the scene with methodical precision, his nose working to gather information, while Atlas whimpered and pressed his warm body against the officer's legs, as if trying to share his heat and strength. Kendra pulled out their emergency phone with shaking hands. The screen flickered but held signal. "I'm calling 911, she said, her voice tight with controlled panic. 911, what's your emergency? This is Kendra Williams. We found a police officer shot in Oakwood Forest. He's unconscious and bleeding real bad. We're on the old timber trail about 3/4 of a mile past Beaver Creek Bridge. Help is on the way, sweetie. Are you safe? Are the shooters still around?" Kaya was already pulling off her hoodie, pressing the fabric firmly against the chest wounds. "Kendra, tell them we're trying to stop the bleeding, but he needs help now." Officer Devon Hayes was 29 years old, a 7-year veteran of the Millfield Police Department. The son of a Baptist preacher and a school teacher, he'd grown up understanding the difference between right and wrong with crystal clarity. He was lean and athletic, with kind eyes and a reputation for fairness that had earned him respect throughout the community. What his colleagues didn't know was that Devon had been quietly investigating a pattern of evidence tampering and case dismissals that seemed to follow certain officers. Someone had discovered his investigation, and they'd decided to silence him permanently in the depths of Oakwood Forest. "They're coming," Kendra said, ending the call and kneeling beside her sister. "But they said it could take 15 minutes. The main road is blocked by construction." 15 minutes was a lifetime when blood was flowing like water from a broken dam. Kaya looked around desperately and spotted a fallen branch. She snapped it clean in two and used one piece to twist her hoodie tighter around the wounds, creating a crude but effective pressure bandage. "Don't you die on us," she muttered to the unconscious officer. "Don't you dare give up." Caesar suddenly went rigid, his ears swiveling toward the forest. Then came the sound that froze their blood. Voices, rough and getting closer. Men's voices, angry and urgent. "Find those kids," a gravelly voice commanded. "They saw too much." "Should have minded their own business," another replied. "Boss said no witnesses." "3 shots center mass should have finished him," a third voice added. "But those brats had to play hero." Kaya's eyes met Kendra's across the wounded officer's body. A lifetime of twin telepathy passed between them in that instant. They couldn't run. Officer Hayes would die. They couldn't hide. The voices were getting closer, and these woods offered little cover. "Caesar, Atlas," Kaya whispered urgently. "Guard position." Both dogs immediately responded to the command they'd been trained for since puppyhood. Caesar moved to shield the officer's body, while Atlas positioned himself between the girls and the approaching threat, both animals coiled with lethal potential. 3 men emerged from the tree line like shadows given form. The leader was a heavy-set man in his 50s, with cold grey eyes and a face marked by years of violence. He wore hunting camouflage and carried a rifle with practiced ease. Behind him came 2 younger men, one nervous and thin, constantly looking over his shoulder, the other built like a linebacker with dead eyes and scarred knuckles. "Well, well," the leader said, his voice like gravel in a cement mixer. "Looks like we got ourselves some little heroes." "Jesus, Briggs," the nervous one said, his voice cracking. "They're just kids, little girls." "Little girls who can put us all on death row," Briggs snarled, raising his rifle. "Can't have that kind of problem walking around." Caesar's growl rumbled deep and dangerous, a sound that spoke of generations of wolves and the primal duty to protect. Atlas, sensing his father's tension, began to bark. Sharp, aggressive warnings that echoed through the forest like gunshots. "Call off the dogs, girls," Briggs commanded, his finger moving to the trigger. "Do it now, or this gets real ugly real fast." Kaya slowly stood, her small hand resting on Caesar's massive head. At 11 years old, she barely came up to the man's chest, but her voice was steady as steel. "You're the ones who shot the officer." Smart girl, too smart for her own good. His eyes were flat and merciless. "Last chance, call them off." That's when Atlas made his choice. The young dog had been watching, learning, waiting for the right moment. As Briggs's attention focused on Caesar, Atlas exploded forward with all the speed and power of his bloodline. 90 pounds of muscle and fury launched through the air, catching the gunman completely off guard and sending him crashing backward into a tree. The rifle discharged harmlessly into the canopy, as Atlas's jaws clamped down on the man's forearm. "Get it off me!" Briggs screamed, trying to beat the dog away with his free hand. Caesar immediately joined the fight, his years of experience showing as he systematically went after the second gunman. The big dog moved with calculated precision, using his weight and power to drive the man to the ground and pin him there with teeth at his throat. But the third man, the one built like a linebacker, was faster and more vicious than the others. As Atlas circled back from his attack on Briggs, the man caught the young dog with a devastating kick to the ribs. Atlas yelped and staggered, and in that moment of vulnerability, the man brought a heavy branch down across the dog's skull with sickening force. Atlas collapsed, blood flowing from his mouth and nose, each breath a struggle that grew weaker by the second. His golden eyes found Kaya's face one last time, and in that moment, something passed between them, a message of love, of loyalty, of a job well done. Then those beautiful eyes closed forever. The young dog who had bounded through forests with endless joy, who had learned to sit and stay and protect from his father Caesar, who had slept at the foot of the girls' beds every night since he was 8 weeks old, Atlas was gone. His final act on this earth had been to launch himself at armed killers to save the children he loved more than his own life. "Atlas!" Kendra screamed, her voice shattering the forest silence with anguish that no child should ever have to feel. "No, no, no!" Kaya cried out, crawling toward her fallen friend, her small hands reaching for the still form that had been vibrant and alive just moments before. Caesar saw his son die, and something ancient and terrible awakened in the older dog. This wasn't just the loss of a pack member, this was a father watching his child give everything for others. Years of training and discipline evaporated in an instant, replaced by the primal fury of a parent whose offspring had been murdered. The big dog transformed into something beyond domestication, beyond civilization, becoming the very embodiment of righteous vengeance. Caesar's attack was methodical and devastating. He moved like a wolf, like the apex predator his ancestors had been before humans taught them to heel and sit. All three men found themselves facing not just a dog, but nature itself, red in tooth and claw, driven by grief and the sacred duty to avenge his fallen son. In the distance, sirens finally began to wail through the forest, the sweetest sound the girls had ever heard. "We gotta go," the nervous gunman shouted, blood streaming from where Caesar had marked him. "Cops are coming." "This ain't over," Briggs snarled, clutching his mangled arm. "We know where you live." But they were already retreating, crashing through the underbrush like the cowards they'd always been. Kaya crawled to Atlas while Kendra maintained pressure on Officer Hayes' wounds, tears streaming down both their faces. The young dog was motionless, his golden eyes staring sightlessly at the canopy above. "Atlas," Kaya whispered, her small hands gentle on his bloodied fur. "Thank you for saving us." Caesar whimpered and lay down beside his son, as if trying to share whatever strength he had left. The big dog's eyes were filled with a grief that transcended species, the agony of a parent watching his child slip away. The EMTs arrived 6 minutes later, followed by what seemed like half the Millfield Police Department. Detective Lieutenant Shauna Williams was among them, her heart stopping when she saw her daughters kneeling beside Atlas's motionless body, their clothes stained with his blood and their faces streaked with tears. But it was Caesar who broke everyone's heart. The big dog lay beside his son's body, his massive head resting across Atlas's still chest, whimpering softly in a language that transcended species. It was the sound of a father saying goodbye, of love that knew no bounds, of loyalty that extended beyond death itself. "Oh, Caesar," Shauna whispered, kneeling beside the grieving dog. Even the hardened EMTs paused in their work, moved by the raw emotion radiating from the faithful animal. Shauna Williams was a formidable woman at 39, with the lean build of a marathon runner and eyes that missed nothing. She'd clawed her way up through 15 years of police work, facing down prejudice and proving herself time and again in a department that hadn't always welcomed black women in positions of authority. As the only black female detective lieutenant in Millfield's history, she'd learned to be twice as good to get half the recognition. But seeing her daughters in danger stripped away all professional composure. "Are you hurt?" she demanded, her hands running over them frantically, checking for injuries. "Tell me you're not hurt." "We're okay, Mama," Kaya said, her voice hollow with grief. "But Atlas, he saved us. And now he's—" The veterinarian arrived within minutes. Dr. Marcus Johnson, a black man in his 50s who'd been treating the family's dogs since the girls were toddlers. He took one look at Atlas and his expression grew grim. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. "He's gone. But what he did, he saved your daughters' lives. Dogs like Atlas, they understand sacrifice in ways that humble the rest of us." As they prepared to move Atlas's body, Caesar refused to leave his side. The big dog had to be coaxed away, and even then he kept looking back, his amber eyes filled with a grief that would have brought tears to stone. As Officer Hayes was loaded onto a stretcher, one of the paramedics stopped to speak with the girls. "You two saved his life," she said simply. "Without your first aid and that brave dog buying you time, he wouldn't have made it." The manhunt began within the hour. Using descriptions from the twins and evidence gathered at the scene, every available officer joined the search. Caesar, despite his grief, led investigators to tracks and scent trails that would prove crucial in the hours to come. The investigation moved fast. Within 48 hours, police had arrested Marcus Briggs, Tommy Chen, and David Powell. Under interrogation, the scared one, Chen, broke first, revealing a conspiracy that reached deep into the Millfield Police Department itself. For 15 years, a group of corrupt officers had been tampering with evidence, dismissing cases, and taking bribes from drug dealers and organized crime figures. Officer Hayes had gotten too close to the truth, so they decided to eliminate him in a way that looked like a random attack. What they hadn't counted on was two brave girls and their faithful dogs. The corruption investigation that followed rocked Millfield to its core. 7 officers, 2 detectives and a deputy chief were arrested in the largest police scandal in the city's history. The evidence Hayes had gathered, combined with testimony from the arrested gunman, exposed a web of corruption that had allowed countless criminals to walk free while honest cops were silenced or transferred. But the real revelation came when Briggs, facing the death penalty, made a deal with prosecutors. He revealed that the corruption ring had been responsible for the unsolved murder of Officer James Mitchell, Shauna Williams's former partner, 3 years earlier. Mitchell had also been investigating police corruption when he was found shot to death in what was ruled a robbery gone wrong. The news hit Shauna like a physical blow. James had been more than a partner. He'd been her mentor, her friend, and the godfather to her daughters. Learning that his death wasn't random, that it was calculated murder by their own colleagues, ignited a fury in her that would drive her to seek justice for years to come. The funeral for Atlas was unlike anything Millfield had ever seen. Over 300 people gathered in Riverside Park, officers and civilians alike, coming to pay their respects to a dog who had died protecting children. The Millfield Police Honor Guard presented a folded flag to Kaya and Kendra, and a bugler played taps as Atlas was laid to rest beneath an oak tree where he had once loved to chase squirrels. Caesar stood vigil throughout the service, never moving, never making a sound, his presence a testament to the unbreakable bonds that exist between fathers and sons, between protectors and those they love. When the ceremony ended, he walked to the grave and lay down beside it, where he would return every day for months to come. The monument erected 3 weeks later bore a simple inscription, Atlas Williams, age 18 months. He died as he lived, protecting those he loved. Below that, a bronze relief showed a young German shepherd mid-leap, frozen forever in his moment of ultimate courage. 2 weeks after the funeral, Officer Devon Hayes was released from the hospital. His first request surprised everyone. He wanted to meet the girls who'd saved his life, and he wanted to bring something special. When Shauna brought Kaya and Kendra to Hayes's apartment, they found him waiting with a surprise that made them gasp. A beautiful German shepherd puppy, barely 8 weeks old, wiggled in his arms with boundless energy. "This is Valor," Hayes said, his voice still rough from the breathing tube. "Atlas's nephew. His brother had a litter last month, and I thought, "Well, I thought Atlas would want you to have family." Caesar, who'd accompanied them, immediately went to investigate the puppy. After a careful sniff, the big dog's tail began to wag, the first time since the attack. It was as if he understood that life goes on, that love multiplies rather than diminishes when shared. "I don't know how to thank you," Hayes said to the girls, tears in his eyes. "You don't have to thank us," Kendra replied. "Anyone would have done the same thing." Hayes shook his head. "No, they wouldn't have. Most adults would have run. You stayed and fought." The ceremony 6 weeks later filled the Millfield Civic Center. Mayor Patricia Johnson presented the girls with the city's highest civilian honor. Officer Hayes, walking with only a slight limp, pinned medals on both Caesar's collar and placed one on Atlas's monument, while little Valor played at their feet. "Heroes," Hayes said, his voice carrying across the packed auditorium, "come in all shapes and sizes. Sometimes they're 11 years old with more courage than most adults will ever possess. Sometimes they have 4 legs and hearts bigger than their bodies. And sometimes they pay the ultimate price to protect those they love." Caesar wore his medal with dignity, while Valor simply chewed on the ribbon that had been tied around his tiny collar. The most meaningful moment came afterward, when Hayes pulled Shauna aside. "I want to transfer to internal affairs," he said. "Help clean up what's left of this corruption. Make sure what happened to Officer Mitchell and to me never happens again." Shauna nodded, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "James would have been proud of you, of all of us." The trials that followed sent all 3 gunmen to life sentences, without parole. The corrupt officers received sentences ranging from 10 to 25 years. The deputy chief, who'd been the ringleader, was sentenced to death, a sentence that was later commuted to life without parole. But it was during Marcus Briggs's sentencing hearing that something extraordinary happened. As victim impact statements were being read, Caesar was brought into the courtroom. The moment the grieving dog saw Briggs, something shifted in the room's atmosphere. Caesar didn't bark or growl. Instead, he simply stared at the man who had killed his son, his amber eyes holding a weight of judgment that seemed to pierce through to Briggs's soul. Judge Patricia Coleman, a veteran of 30 years on the bench, later said she had never seen anything like it. "That dog's presence in my courtroom carried more moral authority than any witness I've ever heard," she remarked. "He didn't need words. His grief spoke volumes about the cost of evil choices." Briggs broke down completely. "I can't get that dog out of my head," he sobbed to the court. "Every night I see him watching his boy die because of what I did. That young dog died protecting children, and I killed him like he was nothing. But he wasn't nothing. He was everything they said he was, a hero." Officer Devon Hayes did transfer to internal affairs, where he became instrumental in implementing reforms that transformed the Millfield Police Department. Detective Lieutenant Shauna Williams was promoted to captain, becoming the first black woman to hold that rank in Millfield's history. 6 months after the attack, Kaya and Kendra, with their mother's help, started the Atlas Foundation, a non-profit organization that trained therapy dogs for children who'd experienced trauma. Caesar became their first certified therapy dog, with little Valor following in his paw prints as he grew. The foundation's motto, inscribed on a plaque in their training facility, came from something Kaya had said during a newspaper interview. "Atlas taught us that sometimes being brave means you might get hurt, but protecting the people you love is always worth it." Dr. Angela Foster, a child psychologist who worked with the foundation, documented case after case of children who found healing through their connection with Caesar. "He has an almost supernatural ability to sense grief," she explained. "Children who haven't spoken since losing their pets will open up to him immediately. It's as if he carries Atlas's spirit with him, and that spirit brings comfort to others who have experienced similar loss." On quiet Saturday mornings, 2 sisters and their 2 dogs still walk the trails of Oakwood Forest. The timber trail where they found Officer Hayes has been renamed the Atlas Memorial Trail, marked with a bronze plaque that tells the story of courage, sacrifice, and the unbreakable bond between children and their faithful companions. Caesar walks with the wisdom of age and experience, his muzzle now more grey than black, but his step still sure and strong. Little Valor bounds ahead with all the enthusiasm of youth, protected and guided by his elder, just as the cycle of love and loyalty continues. The forest remembers their story. Every rustling leaf, every shaft of sunlight through the canopy whispers the truth that Captain Shauna Williams tells her daughters every night before bed. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing what's right even when you're terrified. It's standing up when everyone else sits down. It's choosing love over safety and justice over silence. Sometimes miracles don't come as lightning bolts or grand rescues. Sometimes they arrive in the form of two young girls who refuse to let evil win, and dogs who understand that love means protecting those who cannot protect themselves, no matter the cost. This story reminds us that heroism doesn't require age, badges, or weapons. It requires heart and the decision to act when action is needed most. In our darkest moments, God often works through the least expected, through children, through animals, through ordinary people who make extraordinary choices. The corruption that seemed unbreakable was shattered by the courage of children. The injustice that had thrived in darkness was exposed by the sacrifice of the innocent. And the love between a family and their dogs proved stronger than hatred, stronger than greed, stronger than the evil that tried to silence the truth. Atlas's sacrifice reminds us that sometimes the smallest among us demonstrate the greatest bravery. His story lives on in every act of courage, every moment when someone chooses to protect the innocent, every time love conquers fear. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs to believe in goodness again. Comment below and tell us about the heroes in your own life, the people or animals who've shown you what real courage looks like. And don't forget to subscribe to join us in sharing more stories that uplift, heal, and inspire. May you find the strength to do what's right, even when it's hard. May you have the courage to stand up for those who cannot stand up for themselves. And may you never forget that sometimes the smallest acts of bravery can change the world. Stay safe, stay strong, and never stop believing in the power of ordinary people to do extraordinary things when love is on the line.